The quantum resonance alarms blared through the crystalline spires of Lumeria Prime for the third time that cycle. Ambassador Zara Tel Eris watched with growing dread as another defense grid sector went dark on the holographic display. The luminary, masters of light-based technology for over 10,000 years, were being systematically blinded. Another suppression field detected in Sector 7, reported Chief Defender Vental, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with anxiety. The same signature as the others. Whatever this is, it's not natural. Zara's tendrils twisted in contemplation. For centuries, the luminary had maintained their peaceful civilization through superior defensive technology. Their photonic barriers and quantum detection grids had deterred countless would-be invaders. But now, something was methodically dismantling these defenses, using techniques that shouldn't exist. "Show me the deep space readings again," she commanded. The hologram shifted, revealing a pattern that made her inner light dim with recognition. No, it can't be. But the energy signatures were unmistakable. The Void Collective had returned. Ancient records spoke of their first emergence 50,000 years ago. A species that had evolved in the spaces between stars, beings that fed on energy itself. They had nearly consumed the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing into the unknown regions. "Ambassador," Vental's voice cracked with urgency, "we're detecting quantum distortions at the edge of the Helios cluster. Their signatures match the historical archives." The Luminary High Council convened within the hour. The chamber's crystal walls, usually alive with dancing lights, were subdued. Fear, an emotion rarely felt by their species, permeated the room. "Our long-range sensors confirm it," First Speaker Lanvor announced. "The Void Collective's fleet will reach our outer colonies within 30 standard cycles. Our primary defense systems are already compromised. The secondary networks show signs of degradation. We must request aid from the Galactic Council," Second Speaker Myrna insisted. "Our allies." "Have you forgotten history?" interrupted Council Elder Jevkor. "The last time the Void Collective appeared, entire civilizations fell. The Andromedi, the Silari, the Great Concordat, all gone. No species has ever successfully repelled them." Zara stepped forward, her form brightening with determination. "There is one species we haven't considered, one that wasn't present during the Collective's last invasion." The council chamber fell silent. They knew of whom she spoke. Humanity, the galaxy's newest spacefaring civilization, barely 3 centuries into their expansion. The species that had somehow achieved faster than light travel using repurposed mining equipment and jury-rigged fusion drives. The humans. Elder Jevkor's luminescence flickered with dismissal. "They're technological infants. Their oldest colonies are younger than our newest buildings. Yet they achieved in 3 centuries what took us millennia," Zora countered. "Their methods are unconventional, but their rate of innovation is unprecedented." First Speaker Lanvor raised his primary tendril for silence. "Even if we were to request their aid, their military capability is fraction of ours. What could they possibly offer against the Void Collective?" Zara activated a holographic display, showing various human achievements. "They lack our refinement, yes, but they possess something we've lost: the ability to make incredible leaps in understanding, to see solutions where we see only problems. Their shorter lifespans have driven them to innovate at a pace we can barely comprehend." The council debated for hours as more defense sectors went dark. Finally, with no other options remaining, they authorized a transmission to Earth's United Defense Council. The response came faster than anyone expected. Humanity would send aid. But the details of their response left the Luminary Council in stunned silence. "They're sending what?" Elder Jevkor demanded, reading the transmission again. "Their research and development fleet," Zora confirmed, "not their main military forces." "This is an insult." The Elder's light pulsed with anger. "We face extinction, and they send us their test pilots and experimental ships." But Zora noticed something in the human transmission that others had missed. a simple phrase that made her inner light pulse with curiosity. Trust us. Sometimes the best shield is the one your enemy doesn't see coming. As she watched the defense grids continue to fail, Zora wondered if humanity knew something about defeating the Void Collective that the Luminary, with all their ancient wisdom, had never considered. Perhaps, she thought, that was exactly why the humans had chosen to send their R&D fleet instead of their military. Within days, the first human ships would arrive. And with them, the true test of whether humanity's unconventional approach to problem-solving could achieve what millennia of traditional military might could not. The war for survival was about to begin, and it would be fought with weapons that neither the Luminary nor the Void Collective could possibly expect. Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Research and Development Fleet stood at the viewport of the ESS Catalyst, watching her ships emerge from hyperspace into Luminary territory. To most observers, the fleet would appear underwhelming. 15 vessels of varying sizes, their hulls bearing the scars and patches of countless experimental modifications. No two ships looked quite the same. "Luminary Defense Command is hailing us," reported Lieutenant Park from his jury-rigged communications station. "They sound disappointed." Sarah smiled. "Put them through." The holographic image of Chief Defender Vental materialized, his bioluminescent patterns dulled with obvious concern. "Commander Chen, we expected a larger force." "Quality over quantity, Chief Defender," Sarah replied, gesturing to her bridge. Where most military vessels sported rigid, standardized configurations, the Catalyst's bridge resembled a cross between a laboratory and a mechanic's workshop. Experimental displays flickered with data streams, and modified sensor arrays hummed with barely contained energy. "Our entire civilization is at stake," Vental protested. "The Void Collective has already disabled 60% of our defensive networks. They'll reach the Helios cluster in less than 20 standard cycles." "Perfect," Sarah said, surprising the Luminary leader. "That gives us time to set up our welcome party." She turned to her crew. "Deploy the Quantum Boys. Let's get our playground ready." The R&D fleet spread out, each ship releasing small, seemingly insignificant devices into space. The Luminary watched with growing frustration as the human vessels appeared to waste time on what looked like scientific surveys rather than military preparations. Ambassador Zara Tel Eris observed from her station in the Luminary Command Center, her curiosity piqued by the humans' methodical approach. "They're creating some kind of grid," she noted, studying the pattern of deployed devices. "A grid of sensors?" Vental asked hopefully. "No," Sarah's voice came through the comm channel. "Something better. You'll see soon enough." Speaking of which, she paused as new alerts flashed across her screens. "Looks like we have company. Void Collective scout ships entering from Vector 317. The Luminary Command Center erupted in activity. 3 massive Void Collective vessels had appeared, their black hulls seeming to absorb both light and hope. Each one dwarfed the largest human ship by several orders of magnitude. "Commander Chen," Vental urged, "you must withdraw your vessels. These are just scout ships, and even they could destroy your entire fleet." "Probably," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "If they could hit us." She turned to her crew. "Initiate Project Coastwalker." What happened next defied the Luminary's understanding of physics. The human ships shifted, not in the conventional sense of movement, but in their very reality. They became indistinct, like mirages in space. Sensor readings showed them in multiple locations simultaneously. The Void Collective ships opened fire, their energy weapons capable of shredding battleships. But their attacks passed through empty space. The human vessels seemed to dance between moments of existence, never quite where they appeared to be. "Quantum probability manipulation," Sarah explained to the stunned Luminary observers. "We don't try to be stronger than our enemies. We just make sure they can't actually fight us." The R&D fleet's response was equally baffling. Instead of conventional weapons, they launched what looked like fragments of distorted space, Where these fragments touched the Void Collective ships, reality itself seemed to hiccup. Systems failed, energy weapons discharged harmlessly into nowhere, and the massive vessels began to drift. Localized probability cascades, Sarah continued, her voice carrying the excitement of a scientist explaining a fascinating experiment. Turns out, if you can't beat an enemy's superior technology, you can make physics itself become unreliable around them. Within minutes, the scout ships retreated, their crews clearly confused by their inability to affect the small human fleet. As they disappeared into hyperspace, Ventel's patterns pulsed with disbelief. How? How did you develop such technology? Oh, these are just prototypes, Sarah replied casually. Half our systems are held together with what you might call educated guesswork and a lot of hope. But that's the beauty of the R&D fleet. We don't have to follow the rules. In fact, we're actively trying to break them. Ambassador Zara stepped forward, her inner light brightening with understanding. You sent this fleet because conventional military forces would be useless against the Void Collective. You needed ships that could change the rules of engagement itself. Sarah nodded. The Void Collective expects powerful enemies with powerful weapons. Instead, they're getting ships that treat the laws of physics more like gentle suggestions. But this was just a scout force. The real test will come when their main fleet arrives. As if to emphasize her point, long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching. The Void Collective's main invasion force had arrived ahead of schedule. Well, Sarah said, her eyes lighting up with the enthusiasm of a scientist presented with a fascinating new problem. Looks like we get to test our more experimental systems ahead of schedule. Anyone interested in seeing what happens when you cross a quantum uncertainty field with a temporal probability matrix? The real battle was about to begin, and conventional wisdom about warfare was about to become as uncertain as the quantum states the human fleet manipulated. The void between stars erupted with impossible light as the Void Collective's main fleet emerged from hyperspace. Thousands of massive black ships filled the sensors, their hulls drinking in starlight like cosmic predators. The Luminary Command Center fell silent as the scale of the invasion force became clear. By the first light, Vental whispered, his bioluminescence dimming with dread. There are more of them than all historical records indicated. Commander Sarah Chen studied the tactical display aboard the ESS Catalyst, her expression showing interest rather than fear. Dr. Rodriguez, are you seeing these energy readings? The way they're absorbing ambient radiation is fascinating. Commander, Vental's voice carried barely contained panic. This is not the time for scientific observation. Their fleet outnumbers us 10,000 to 1. Numbers stopped mattering the moment humanity discovered coffee and quantum mechanics, Sarah replied, tapping commands into her console. Lieutenant Park, activate the entanglement network. Across the 15 ships of the R&D fleet, crews initiated what looked like a scattered collection of jury-rigged devices. Sparks flew from improvised connections, and more than a few warning lights flashed. But the system held. What are you doing? Ambassador Zora asked, watching as strange energy patterns began linking the human vessels. Something incredibly stupid that just happens to work, Sarah explained. We've quantum entangled our entire fleet. Every ship, every system, every action perfectly coordinated through probability spaces that shouldn't exist. The Void Collective about to fight one ship in 15 different places simultaneously. The invasion force launched its first assault, a wave of energy weapons designed to strip away conventional shields and tear through hull plating. But the human fleet moved with impossible precision, each ship reacting to threats before they fully materialized. That's impossible, a luminary tactical officer protested. Their movements predict our enemy's actions before they occur. Not prediction, Sarah corrected. We're utilizing quantum superposition across the entire fleet. Our ships exist in multiple probable states until the enemy commits to an action. We're essentially fighting from every possible position until we choose the most advantageous one. The R&D fleet's response demonstrated this bizarre tactical approach. Ships would appear to take devastating hits, only to phase back into reality undamaged in positions that made no tactical sense, until those positions allowed them to unleash devastating counterattacks. "Remember those quantum buoys we deployed?" Sarah asked as her fleet executed maneuvers that ignored conventional physics. "They're not just sensors. They're probability anchors. Every space between them is a region where we can temporarily rewrite local spacetime." The Void Collective's superior numbers began to matter less as they found themselves unable to land effective attacks on ships that existed in multiple states simultaneously. But the invasion force's sheer scale meant that even impossible tactics couldn't hold them back forever. "They're adapting," Dr. Rodriguez reported as several human ships flickered dangerously between states. "The entanglement network is straining under the load." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. They'd have to be pretty poor conquerors if they couldn't adapt. Time for Phase 2. She opened a channel to the Luminary Command. "Ambassador Zara, remember how we said our ship's primary function was research and development? Want to see what we've been developing?" The human fleet suddenly shifted formation, their seemingly random positions resolving into a precise geometric pattern. The quantum buoys pulsed with new energy as the ships linked their experimental systems. "In theory," Sarah explained as her crew initiated sequences that made their jury-rigged equipment groan in protest, "if you can manipulate quantum states across multiple ships simultaneously, you can create a cascading effect that, well, let's just say physics gets very interesting." The space around the R&D fleet began to distort. Energy weapons from the Void Collective ships didn't just miss. They curved back on impossible trajectories. Some simply vanished, while others reappeared from unexpected vectors to strike their own ships. "We're not just dodging their attacks," Sarah continued, her voice carrying the excitement of a scientist watching a successful experiment. "We're using their own energy against them. Every shot they fire adds to our probability matrix. They're literally making us stronger." Ambassador Zara watched in amazement as the apparently outmatched human fleet began to turn the tide of battle. "This isn't warfare," she realized. "This is applied innovation. You're not fighting them. You're solving them like a physics problem." "Exactly." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Conventional military might doesn't work against enemies like the Void Collective, but give a bunch of scientists some experimental ships and coffee, tell them physics is more of a suggestion than a rule, and suddenly impossible problems become interesting challenges." The battle raged on, but the nature of the conflict had fundamentally changed. The Void Collective found itself fighting an enemy that treated their overwhelming force as merely another variable in an elaborate experiment. And as any scientist knows, failed experiments often lead to the most interesting discoveries. The real question was whether human ingenuity could scale fast enough to counter an enemy that was quickly learning to adapt to the impossible. The quantum displays aboard the ESS Catalyst flickered with warning signals as the Void Collective's adaptation became evident. Their massive fleet had begun emitting interference patterns that disrupted the human ship's probability matrices, forcing them to remain in single states of reality. "They're learning," Dr. Rodriguez announced, his hands dancing across 3 different experimental interfaces, quantum entanglement efficiency dropping to 60% and falling. Commander Sarah Chen nodded, watching as the Void Collective's ships began to press their advantage. They figured out how to force quantum collapse across multiple probability states. "Clever." She sounded more impressed than concerned. "Commander," Ambassador Zara's voice carried across the comm channel, "our long-range sensors detect more Void Collective ships entering the system. We cannot survive another wave." "Agreed," Sarah replied, surprising the luminary. "At least, not with our current approach. Time to try something monumentally ill-advised." She turned to her crew. "Remember that theoretical paper about using quantum entanglement to create artificial wormholes?" Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened. "The one that every physics journal rejected as impossible." "That's the one. Let's prove them wrong." Sarah opened a channel to the Luminary Command. Ambassador, your people are masters of light-based technology, correct? How do you feel about helping us break several fundamental laws of physics? What followed was perhaps the fastest collaboration between species in galactic history. As the Void Collective pressed their attack, human and luminary scientists worked frantically to combine their technologies in ways neither species had considered possible. Your photonic barriers, Sarah explained as she helped integrate luminary crystal tech with human quantum systems. They don't just block energy, they store it. And our probability matrices don't just dodge attacks, they redirect them. What if we combine them? Understanding dawned in Ambassador Zara's patterns. You want to use our barrier technology to capture their energy weapons, then channel that power through your quantum field. Exactly. Instead of fighting their superior numbers, we'll use their own energy to punch holes in spacetime. Dr. Rodriguez, start converting our quantum buoys into wormhole anchors. Ambassador, we'll need your crystal tech to handle the power conversion. The Void Collective ships pressed closer, their weapons tearing through space with increasing accuracy as they learned to counter the humans' quantum tricks. But this time, instead of dodging, the R&D fleet's jury-rigged ships began absorbing the attacks through hastily modified luminary crystals. Power accumulation at 80%, Dr. Rodriguez reported as the ship's hulls groaned under the strain. Warning lights flooded the bridge, and more than a few systems began smoking. Luminary crystal matrix holding stable, Zara added, her patterns pulsing with a mix of fear and excitement. But we cannot contain this much energy for long. We don't need long, Sarah replied, her fingers flying across multiple interfaces. Just need enough power to prove that peer review process wrong. Initiating wormhole sequence. Now. Space itself seemed to scream as the combined human luminary technology tore open dozens of small wormholes throughout the battlefield. The R&D fleet, their ships now glowing with captured energy, began executing what looked like a carefully choreographed dance through these spatial tiers. The beautiful thing about wormholes, Sarah explained to the amazed luminary observers, is that they let you be in multiple places at once. No quantum uncertainty required. One small fleet can suddenly engage from everywhere simultaneously. The Void Collective's tactical advantage evaporated as the human ships emerged from wormholes at impossible angles, their weapons now enhanced by captured energy and luminary focusing crystals. Each ship could strike and vanish, reappearing across vast distances to strike again before the enemy could respond. They're not attacking randomly, Zara realized, watching the pattern emerge. They're using our crystal technology to create resonance points. Each strike amplifies the effect of the next. She was right. The R&D fleet had turned the battlefield into an elaborate physics experiment. Each attack set up the next, creating cascade effects that rippled through space. The Void Collective ships found their energy weapons not just blocked or absorbed, but redirected through wormholes to strike from unexpected vectors. Remember what I said about solving them like a physics problem? Sarah asked as her fleet executed maneuvers that defied conventional tactics. Turns out the solution was collaboration. Human theoretical physics combined with luminary practical application. The Void Collective's formation began to break as their ships found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere, using their own power against them in ways that violated their understanding of reality. But Sarah knew they couldn't maintain this advantage forever. Crystal matrix reaching critical levels. Zara warned as the combined technology strained under the impossible loads being placed on it. Perfect, Sarah replied with a grin. Because I got one more terrible idea to try. How do you feel about using all that stored energy to create one really big wormhole? The battle's final phase was about to begin, and it would prove that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't advanced technology or overwhelming numbers. It was the ability to look at impossible problems and say, why not? The combined energy of thousands of Void Collective weapons churned within the modified luminary crystals aboard the R&D fleet. Warning signals blared across every ship as systems strained to contain power never meant to be harnessed by experimental equipment. Hull integrity at 30%, Dr. Rodriguez reported, rerouting power through circuits that were literally melting from the strain. We can't contain this much energy for more than a few minutes. Commander Sarah Chen nodded, her fingers dancing across 3 separate interface panels that sparked with every input. We don't need minutes. Ambassador Zara, are your crystal harmonics synchronized? The luminary ambassador's patterns pulsed with intense concentration as she worked with her team. Ready. But Commander, what you're proposing, creating a wormhole of that magnitude, will either save everyone or create a very interesting physics paper for whoever survives to write it. Sarah completed. She opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, prepare for final sequence, and maybe say a quick prayer to whatever laws of physics we're about to violate. The R&D fleet moved into its final formation, each ship trailing ribbons of contained energy that should have torn them apart. The Void Collective pressed their attack, sensing weakness in their prey's desperate maneuver. They think we're about to overload, Sarah observed. They're not wrong. We are, just not in the way they expect. She took a deep breath. Initiate Project Horizon. 15 experimental ships, held together by determination and jury-rigged modifications, began channeling their stored energy through luminary crystals. Space itself seemed to shudder as power levels reached theoretical impossibilities. The crystals aren't just focusing the energy, Zara realized, watching the readings. They're harmonizing it across quantum states. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Your crystal technology doesn't just store energy. It can make different forms of energy resonate at the same frequency. And when you combine that with our quantum probability matrices, the fabric of space-time screamed as the laws of physics bent under the combined might of human theoretical science and luminary practical application. A massive wormhole tear began to form at the heart of the Void Collective fleet. They're trying to escape, Vental reported from Luminary Command. Their ships are attempting emergency jumps to hyperspace. That's not going to work, Sarah explained, her voice carrying the calm certainty of a scientist observing a proven hypothesis. The quantum harmonics we've established are disrupting their ability to generate stable hyperspace fields. They can either stay and face what comes next, or try to jump and tear themselves apart. The Void Collective chose to stay and fight. It was exactly what Sarah had counted on. All ships, release contained energy on my mark, she ordered. Dr. Rodriguez, initiate quantum cascade. Ambassador Zara, prepare for crystal resonance peak. The combined fleet executed their final gambit with perfect precision. The stored energy, harmonized through luminary crystals and channeled through human quantum matrices, poured into the massive wormhole. But instead of creating a stable passage through spacetime, it did something else entirely. The wormhole's inverting, Dr. Rodriguez announced, his voice filled with scientific awe. It's creating a quantum reflection state. The Void Collective ships found themselves facing not just a tear in space, but a mirror of quantum possibilities. Every attack they launched, every bit of energy they had expended throughout the battle, came rushing back at them through countless probable timelines simultaneously. That's the thing about energy, Sarah explained as she watched the Void Collective fleet torn apart by their own power. It can't be destroyed. It can only be transformed. And when you combine quantum uncertainty with crystal harmonics, you can transform it in some very interesting ways. The battle ended not with a dramatic explosion, but with a cascade of quantum collapse that rippled through space. When it was over, the remnants of the Void Collective fleet hung powerless, their energy absorbed and reflected back until their ships were nothing but empty husks. In the aftermath, as human and luminary crews worked to stabilize the damaged regions of spacetime, Ambassador Zora approached Commander Chen with a new understanding. You never intended to fight them conventionally, she said. This entire battle was an experiment. Sarah nodded. The best way to defeat an enemy isn't always to overpower them. Sometimes you just need to look at the problem differently. Your people have been developing incredible technology for millennia. We just helped you see new ways to use it. The implications rippled through the galaxy faster than light. The luminary, masters of established scientific principles, had partnered with humanity, breakers of conventional wisdom, to achieve what neither could have done alone. It marked the beginning of a new era of galactic cooperation. Research centers were established combining luminary precision with human theoretical innovation. The R&D fleet, their ships still held together more by ingenuity than conventional engineering, became the model for a new type of scientific expedition force. "You know," Sarah mused as she watched human and luminary scientists excitedly sharing ideas, "some say humanity's greatest weakness is our short lifespan. We don't have centuries to perfect our technology or millennia to refine our understanding." "But that is your greatest strength," Zara replied, her patterns glowing with new insight. "You don't have time to wait for perfect solutions, so you find impossible ones instead." The legacy of the battle wasn't just victory over an ancient enemy. It was proof that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology, or numbers, or even raw power. It was the ability to look at impossible problems and ask, what if we try something crazy? And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, 15 experimental ships continued their mission, ready to solve the next impossible problem with nothing more than coffee, quantum mechanics, and the audacity to ignore the word impossible.